The U.S. Army has completed its withdrawal from Niger, ending 11 years of military cooperation. Now, the U.S. is now searching for alternative locations for its military base, with Côte d'Ivoire and Benin Republic being considered. However, both countries present logistical challenges due to their distance from the epicenter of terrorist activity in the region. Now, it does seem like terrorism is spreading rapidly in West Africa, and are foreign and regional cooperation needed to fight the threat? What implications will the U.S. withdrawal from Niger have on regional security and counterterrorism efforts, especially in Nigeria, and particularly in light of the growing threat of terrorist groups in the Sahel region? Now, joining us on the conversation to speak on this, I'm joined by Dr. Seyi Adetayo, security and intelligence expert. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us at this time. All right, I'm also being joined by Augustine Egar, also a security expert. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you for joining us.
Good evening. It's my pleasure joining you this evening.
It's a pleasure to have you. All right, let me begin with you, Doctor. Now, with the U.S. withdrawing from Niger, after 11 years of partnership, how does this affect the regional balance of power, especially in the fight against terrorism?
Well, a little bit of correction, Dashin. My name is Egar. I am Augustine Egar.
Okay.
Not Dr. Seyi.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Austin or Augustine. Thank you.
Augustine Egar.
All right. It's a pleasure to have you. Please go ahead.
All right. I think before we to get to the U.S. withdrawing from the Niger area after spending so much years, I think they see some kind of I can see the insincerity of the government in power right now because we have a military junta there. And there have been these joint collaborations with Niger, we have Mali, we have Burkina Faso. And I see some kind of international play whereby this Niger, they want a new kind of marriage which we know of the Wagner people, the Wagner force, Wagner group, helping out in those three countries. And so I don't think they see it favorable for them. They don't see any honesty in the fight of terrorism by that particular government. And I think that's why they're shifting their ground.
Okay. Now, is there something, should we be scared about it? Does this withdrawal leave a security vacuum, especially when it comes down to West Africa?
Of course, there's a vacuum because it's a deterrent to have the U.S. in that kind of a place. Niger is a very large mass. They have a very large land mass. And so for them to pull out, and we have a government that's, in quote, the government the world don't trust because what the world is clamoring for is democracy. And so they have a government that is military. The military approach is different from democracy. They don't represent the interest of everyone. That's a military rule. It's based on decree. And so it's not the government of the people. And so I think U.S. from the diplomatic angle, staying there, they also see that indirectly they feel they will be supporting them. And there's a lot of implication because Niger to Nigeria is quite close. Yeah. And the presence of America, U.S. have been helping out to deal with terrorism within our region. For them pulling out, of course, they said they're looking for a place in Benin and all of that, but that other place was safer for them and very strategic for them. And so there's actually some we should be worried about it, but we want to see where we will get with this.
All right. Now, Augustine, now given the increase in attacks and also fatalities in the West African region, do you believe that, we know that the U.S., has actually left Niger right now, but do you believe that the U.S. military presence has had a net positive or negative impact on regional stability?
Well, we can't say. There have always been partners in the fight of terrorism in any nation in the world. And so we cannot be negative about their presence in Niger. They have been partners to fight off terrorism in almost, even in the Middle East and everywhere they have their presence. And so for them being in Africa and choosing Niger as a strategic place for them over the years, it's been helpful for us because they are good partners to Nigeria. So we have very good relationship with the US. So if they're in Niger, it's still of good interest to us. We can see all the advisory that they've been giving in the US advisory to their citizens and to Nigeria. We see that it's of good interest to us. They are technologically higher, advanced than any other nation within the Sahel. It's like fighting terrorism is not just a traditional approach. They have been using all of their technologies to assist, get information, and then share with the government bodies. It's left for the government within the Sahel region to do what they have advised them to do. Of course, some they don't accept and some they take serious. So for them leaving, I don't know if they have their tech still installed that could help monitor the area and then give feedback. So that's where it is. That's where I see that they've been good partners.
Okay. Now, I'm being told that Dr. Seyi Adetayo, security and intelligence expert, has actually joined us. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Dr. Adetayo. Hello, Dr. Adetayo. Can you hear me? All right, we'll try to reconnect with him. Now, Augustine, still on you. Now, the U.S. has actually relied heavily on drone, and this is according to reports that it has relied heavily on drone operations for counter-terrorism in, West Africa while they were still here. But data shows an increase in terrorism since their introduction, and that was why I even asked, the previous question. Now, is it possible for you to explain to us the shortcomings of this particular strategy that's using drone technology?
Well, using the drone technology, we should also be aware of they are a foreign country, and they don't have right to have foot on the ground, boots on the ground to carry out ground operations. They have to work with the nations which they are trying to assist. But in the drone technology, of course, it's air-based, and we know that they can actually use those technologies, and it's hard for you to really trace back. Of course, if the country is very advanced, then they will know where it's coming from. We cannot say that they've not done well for us, but I have searched through and I see that there's a lot of can I say, a colonial rule, a re-colonial rule that is coming in, or the interest in West Africa is growing so much that you see Russia is very interested. In the past, you see that they have strong influence in those three nations, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger now. And so we see it also. France, they don't want to agree with their pre-colonial masters, France and all of that. France and US, they are strong. They are very, very cordial. So we are seeing another country in between those countries or under those countries, and that is where we're having issues. We should be worried because it's like the scrambling and partitioning of Africa or West Africa is just coming into play. After the past, we see them trying to, I don't know what is very of great interest to them within this region. We know that it's a very strategic place. West Africa is very strategic. Russia is interested. And other countries, Western nations, they're interested. So that is where I believe that there could be some political gain.
All right, Augustine, we will come back to, speak on Russia in a bit. But, still talking about West Africa, there has actually been, mention on the importance of strengthening platforms, like the Multinational Joint Task Force and the Accra Initiative. How can these regional organizations overcome political divisions, especially given the growing animosity between some Sahelian countries and also the Western powers?
First of all, we should ask ourselves one question. Are these countries who have joined in partnership, this regional partnership to fight this, are they honest and are they willing to really commit resources and fight? Because we know that one of the most active nation was Chad, the late Idris Deby of Chad, the former Chad president, the Chadian president. He was very active in this regional fight. And we could see that he took it upon himself, and we see that today he's normal. And we see that Chad along the line, as we speak today, they are getting frustrated about the whole regional arrangement. So we ask the questions, which nations are really willing to fight this fight?
Okay, now I actually have a question to ask on that, but I'm going to leave that for later. So I'm actually okay. Now let's talk about the tri-border region, of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, which you've actually touched on quite a bit. And these are all military-led and not democratically led. It is actually considered a hotspot for terrorism, despite those in power. Now, would love for you to assess the current counter-terrorism efforts within this particular area.
I think it's not yielding anything because in some of those countries, you see that in some of those countries, UN have even been asked to leave, and some of the partnership they had within themselves to fight terrorism, they've shut down some of those legal means to fight terrorism. And so it's just the government of the day. Within the three of them, they have entered an alliance. The three nations, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, have entered an alliance, a joint alliance, to protect themselves. So that means they don't need any other kind of arrangement. They don't trust any neighbor in West Africa as I speak. They don't trust even the West, except maybe Russia, a Wagner group that is helping them that they believe they can rely on. So if we talk of fighting this terrorism, is it themselves that are affected? And we have statistics here in Nigeria, some intel that says that some of those headsmen troubling Nigeria, farmers and all of that, some of them have their root from Mali. We hear all of this happening. And so that means there's a straight route from that place to here. So we see the cross-border crime, cross-border criminality that is going on today. And so if they have shut down their own and say they have to do their own, they're not joining with us. It's a very big problem for us because this terrorism fight, it cannot be fought by one nation. It's very expensive. The network is so large, the financial network is large. So for terrorism to succeed and in a nation, it has to do with a lot of funding. And some of this funding, they are cross-border funding. And they work also with some criminal minds in order to fund their operations. So if these nations say they are not going to be part of it, it will be very difficult to win this war.
All right, now, Augustine, thank you so much for that. Now we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with this conversation. Stay with us. All right, welcome back, and thank you for staying with us on the conversation. Now, we've been talking about security in West Africa, and we've been speaking with Augustine Egar. Right now, we have joining us security experts, Dr. Seyi Adetayo and also Dr. Aigbe Diyeli, to join us with their own opinion on our topic of discussion. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us at this time.
Thank you very much.
All right, let me begin with you, Dr. Diyeli. Now, just before the break, Augustine was actually talking about the tri-border region of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and how, it is considered a hotspot for terrorism. Now, would love to hear what role you think local governments play in mitigating the threat around the tri-border region.
Okay, thank you very much. If you look at the Daesh against the Islamic State, when about 50 countries are gathered in Europe, in Italy, how to fight against that is the ISIS, we have already made recommendations about how stakeholders engagement to longer period with the French and the chance to take over but the Mali, Burkina Faso, you can see. So we're talking about stakeholders engagement, the stakeholder involving women leaders, and not just using the military approach alone to fight terrorism. You have to look at the stakeholders engagement involvement, look at all the clergy involved in terrorism. Don't use it. Always make sense in my recommendations on how to solve sensitive events. Don't use the hardline approach. Also because they're military minded, sometimes the battle fight sets in past. They are a recent group that the champ always know put their data. So we make the argument that the regions, look at the Sahel region, look at the Horn of Africa, the Chad Basin, look at state flux of these coming to our borderlines. And we always talked about making regulation government the use of technology a long way. United Nations Resolution 295 and 296, but they lex us within security and involving profit with private sector and a partnership. We're a long way of solving this borderline. We cannot use the borderline is very massive, as Nelson said. You can't just use your human security to combat that. So use of technology is very critical in solving that the borderline security. And we hope the sector can really come in and create a top accountability of how this money is going to be borderline security. So the draw of the French troops created a security board, which they suggest exploiting, and that's what we look at. That will want to form that synergy and the trust with the West. On their own ideology to that effect, and I can see the effect of it. So it's a region, putting our pressure on our own security, and that's why I say battle fatigue set in our military, in police and law people, and that's we see have a long way. It's taking a long time for us to combat, and the political will of our leaders, to take into action, has been very lacking, and nepotism in the system, corruption in the system, it is really affecting the fight against terrorism.
Okay, now let's come to you, Dr. Adetayo. Let's talk about the growing concern about terrorism spreading from the Sahel to coastal West African nations. Now, do you have an idea if anything is being done to prevent this particular spread? We are aware in Nigeria there's a new terrorist group, that's the Lakurawa. How should countries like Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, and Benin prepare for a potential spillover also?
I say for sure that several efforts have been put in place, but the concern is how effective those efforts has been over the years to help in achieving the desired results. It's not only to sit and meet, formulate policy. How well are the countries involved? How well are they working together to ensure that internal and domestic interest does not come in between the desire for regional cooperation and support in ensuring that we put a hand to the incursion or the spread of this terrorist group. If you look at the origin of what we currently have as real terror group, started from the problem in Algeria when the Muslim Brotherhood won the election and the military government decided to annul the election, and it led into war, waged by GSPCs against the Algerian government, and the Algerian government, military government, were able to push them down south towards Mali and Burkina Faso, and they later got support from the Middle East, and they transformed into Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb that we know as Hakim. And several other factions of that group had emanated from them over the years, and the Boko Haram that we know today also has been traced to that emergence of Hakim, where some of the people that went and answered the Mujahideen call then came back to Nigeria and then started what later metamorphosed into Boko Haram today. So, and it has not stopped. It's been on like that for years. We've been seeing handshake, and then we've also been seeing various groups at conflict with one another within that particular region. And of recent is the Lakurawa, which is just a colloquial for the original name, which is called La Cruz. And they were actually invited by the people in Nigeria to come and help them to fight domestic bandits. And later they have become a terror group. We say the way we are structured today and the way each country try to play its own politics, we should not forget the fact that in the Southwest, in the West African region, we have lots of countries that were under the French apron string. like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger Republic, Benin Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, and the rest. And getting the desired support and cooperation has actually been a major problem until recent when Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger decided to overthrow democratically elected government and also decided to kick French out.
Yeah.
Now, this is the twist to this. Now, the way this organization, this country, the way they play their regional and strategic political game is such a way that they don't give up. We've seen these three countries now bringing in Russian mercenaries to work with them and forcing French to even close us some special bases that have been of strategic interest to them. I do not see how what these three countries are doing now will succeed, knowing fully well that the French intelligence and other French interests have structures in and around those areas. So there's a likelihood, which is most likely, for certain, political activities, geopolitical activities going on there that will frustrate what those three countries are trying to do right now. And need I also say that they on their own do not have the capacity to flush out the well-integrated terrorist organizations and groupings already in existence within the Burkina Faso-Niger border and between the Mali-Niger border. We've seen these people coming towards Benin Republic, but the problem is that do they have much of interest to them in Benin Republic? The answer is no. And that's why we've not really had much from the incursion into Benin Republic, because there's not so much for them economically to gain. But in Nigeria, they can easily kidnap a farmer and demand 20 million.
Well, talking about kidnapping and all that, what extent, to what extent do local militias and non-state actors contribute to these, terrorism, this act of terrorism?
They have three major trades: 1, weapon; 2, drugs; 3, kidnappings. That is what they've been doing. Weapons, sales of weapons, smuggling of weapons to different groups. The other trade that they're involved is in drugs. They serve as channel for trans-Sahel drug trade. And 3, they do kidnapping. In fact, they have been so organized in such a way that there are those that will kidnap and they sell to another group whose business is to now trade those that have been sold to them and collect ransom. And we've seen that this value chain have been developed even within Nigeria. If you look at when the bandits kidnap students in Katsina State some years, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, and then even what is his name? Abubakar Shekau offered to buy those 91 students from the bandits. So it's a strong value chain has been built across the whole of the Sahel as we speak now on this. But you have to look at where they can make more profit, where they can see people that really want the effort. And as of today, Benin Republic does not fit the bill. That's why we've not seen much traction around the northern part of Benin Republic. Ghana is gradually growing. We've been seeing some reports of these activities coming, happening in the northern part of Ghana, but it is yet to spread. We should not forget the fact that there are several other issues in Nigeria that is stretching our military team. We have the ESN, IPOB issues in the southeast. We have the militants in the south-south. We have the other criminal elements in the north-central, Boko Haram in the northeast, and the bandit-infested northwest. So our military is such that they are spread thin. So this allows for these people to be able to operate and they do what they want to do, because the kind of resistance that will have pushed them away is difficult to achieve right now.
Okay. Now, Augustine will be coming to you in a bit, but let me just go to Dr. Diyeli, because we had quite difficulty hearing him the last time. Now, Dr. Diyeli, one of the biggest challenges in combating terrorism is intelligence sharing. How can African nations and also foreign powers overcome intelligence sharing barriers and also improve regional cooperation?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead, Dr. Diyeli.
I believe that collaboration will go a long way, and Africans, because it's very important for us to do that. Because intelligence will go a long way, but we don't really spend so much money on intelligence in this part of the world that we just talk about it. But the time of spending money on it, we're not very visible and very potent. So intelligence will go a long way. To go a long way in that form, that synergy, that the partnership and a collaboration with the West, able to do that and able to implement and political way to do that effectively, we go along with solving this problem. But you can't just, we are talking about 21st century technology, use of technology will go a long way. I'm not using the old school methodology. We have not really yielded results. But it's part of the world which will release funds, but we don't have to give account of how that money is being spent. And it's really I remember in the 8 years of Buhari government, about 11.18 trillion has been spent in 8 years of Buhari government. We're just releasing funds. We're not seeing the effect of it in combating insurgency in the Northeast, and that brought military psychology, call it battle fatigue, has trained our law enforcement, the police, and the military, and you can see the audacities of this insurgency attacking even the military facilities and installations, and very dampening the morals of our police, our military. So intelligence will go a long way. In fact, 20th century technology will go a long way in forming that synergy. And intelligence involves a lot of process involving collating those information, disseminating, and analyzing it, and putting into implementation, and making recommendations to government to put those intentions and those into action and make it more visible for our law enforcement agency, the way to combat this insurgency. The insurgencies are having collaboration. They look at the partnership with the ISIS, and even though the ISIS is pretty dead now, but you can see that coalition with the coalition of the Boko Haram with the insurgency. They too are collaborating. So I believe our military, our law enforcement agency, have to do that. We do collaborate internationally and to nip up to the board of insurgency and terror groups in Africa and in West Africa and Africa generally. We don't have to depend on the West alone to do that. We have the capacity as a country, as a continent to be able to do this and do it effectively, and not just releasing funds, but how this money is being spent and that. So private sector should come in this engagement to be able to have this problem solved.
Okay. Now coming to you, Augustine. Now earlier you did talk about, how Chad, was at the forefront of the fight against, regional terrorism, and how we actually saw how the previous president, died, or was a victim to that. Now, do you see Chad as a viable long-term partner for the U.S., especially in counter-terrorism operations?
Chad have been very involved because they know that this thing affects Nigeria so much. Whatever affects Nigeria also affects the economy. And one reason they have been so involved in this fight, and with the pleading from Nigeria or the collaboration from Nigeria, they've not left Nigeria behind over the years. And them pulling out, because they are like at the border part, the border side of Nigeria. If they decide not to be involved in this fight, we see that we have a porous border, very open to Nigeria, and that means Nigeria will be open to several attacks, no matter how it comes. And so they need to build a front that will be very trustworthy. But so far, I see that whatever we call terrorism or whatever, it has to do with the leadership vacuum that we have in this West Africa. And we see the Western powers taking advantage of the leadership vacuum and creating some kind of distorting issues for us in this region. It's so unfair and for our leaders that they are really playing along and they are allowing this.
All right, well, we'll seem to, be having a network connection issue. Now let's come back to you, Dr. Adetayo, if you can hear me. Dr. Adetayo. Dr. Diyeli, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. It seems you're the last man standing. All right. Now, let's talk about the Russia's increasing influence in Sahel. You know, earlier, Augustine was talking about how the Wagner Group, you know, their influence with the Wagner Group and how it has actually raised so much concern. How do these foreign interventions complicate counterterrorism efforts in the region?
Well, if you look at the case study of the French experience they have, and for more than 20 years they've been there, they have not been very effective, and the trust factor within the Burkina Faso, West and Mali, we could see we had about the revolt that took place, and because of that colonial inheritance, you know, applying that where they were colonial masters, that kind of mentality, and they make that coalition between the demolition of against the Daesh, ISIS, was not very sustainable, and the West African countries felt the French people are taking advantage of that vulnerability to inflict their own influence on the region, and that's why I could see what happened in the Syrian crisis when there was a proxy war, and because of the misunderstanding of the Syrian society, President Sadat would be to remain in power, whatever cost it would be, and thinking that Sadat would fall in a matter of time, and the West were reluctant to intervene. That's what we're seeing now in the way Africa, and that's why the Russian took advantage of that reluctancy of the West to intervene in the Syrian war that prolonged. We look at the history of that Syrian war, so the effect of the Arab Spring that took place in Tunisia from Egypt to other Arab countries, and that's Russia took advantage of that reluctance of the West to intervene, and it started to save an influence, and that's why Sadat could not be defeated militarily, and the reluctancy of the hardening of the Damascus said that if we could lose on the military battle, how can we make a negotiation table on the negotiation table? So you see, that's why the Syrian crisis expanded for so long or prolonged for so long, and that's what is happening. And you can see the influence of Russia. Russia is trying to get back to the West now. That since you are reluctant, a lot of human rights violation, and you're not doing your role, so Putin is taking advantage of that reluctance of the West to start this influence. It's now in the see, and it's part of the cry, but it seems the Mali and Burkina Faso their leadership are really having that trust with the Russians, and because they have to do 50-50 now in terms of economic value too. So they tend to trust the Russians' involvement now, and Russia using that one because they call the Russia-Ukraine war. They're trying to now send a narrative to the world that we too to have influence. You don't have to depend on the West alone for us to provide that support level. Just like what China is doing now in the African region, the Belt Initiative to come to give a lot of Africans loans, and even though we cannot pay back. So that's why the Russian people are starting their influence in the region now, and that's why you can see a bit of stability now and a bit of that support level of the Russian.
All right. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us and speaking to us on this. We had Dr. Seyi Adetayo, security and intelligence expert. We also had Dr. Aigbe Diyeli, security consultant, and also Augustine Egar, security expert on the conversation.